Good evening and welcome to another edition of Prompt Response. I am your host, Ryan Ozzie Smith, voted #1 creamiest voice on Twitch 3 years running. I'm a voice actor, Twitch streamer, and you can find me on Twitch by searching Aussie Man Plays. I am also your host for tonight's reading, Poinsettia Creams, the second chapter from the Bram Stoker Award finalist book, Bittersweets, by Angela Yuriko Smith. This story does have some elements of self-harm, graphic violence, and suicide. So if these are things you would rather not listen to, now is your time to click out. Prompt Response is sponsored by Authortunities, a weekly calendar of author opportunities for busy writers who need to know who, how much, and when is the deadline on Substack. You can subscribe on authortunities.substack.com or follow the links in the description. In the last chapter, we met our nameless anti-hero, who experiences his first death so he can grow up, as he puts it. He certainly didn't skimp on the experience. I have a feeling we may see more of him in future episodes. If you'd like to read along, the book is available to read on Kindle Unlimited, links in the description. Chapter 2, Poinsettia Creams. The couple entered the lobby to the Bittersweets, arms linked, close enough that they were practically Siamese twins. The receptionist didn't need to look at the reservation book to see this was her Romeo and Juliet couple, paid in full already, with a bottle of champagne reserved as a post-resuscitation toast. They walked all the way to the front desk without even glancing at their surroundings. The girl blushed and bit her lip whenever she felt her companion's eyes upon her. The man pulled her close with a reassuring arm. The receptionist inwardly sighed and resigned herself to the uncomfortably sweet encounter. "You must be our recently engaged couple, here for your romantic date with death," she said. "Stella and John." As expected, the girl giggled and blushed, and the young man puffed his chest out, while pulling her closer. If he wraps that arm any tighter, the receptionist thought, he may as well strangle her now and save his money. Outwardly, she smiled. "How romantic," she said. "But you didn't opt for the extra rose, wine, and chocolate. Was that an oversight?" Predictably, the girl scowled and looked up at him with narrowed eyes. John caught the look and its meaning. His male ego twisted between the two feminine forces working against him and his budget, before surrendering. "I'm so glad you caught that," he said. He looked down at Stella. "I meant to ask, I thought you probably didn't want chocolate and wine with your poison. That might not go together too well." John looked hopefully as doubt flitted across her face. "Oh, in that case you can have your poison delivered either in the chocolate or the wine, for just a little extra." The receptionist loved this game of placing dollar amounts on affection with some of the clients. "We have poinsettia creams that are to die for." Stella made an excited "oh" from where she was nestled in her man's armpit, and he knew he had lost. "Just a little extra? Then of course, nothing is too good for my princess." The receptionist hid her smug satisfaction behind a smile and busied herself with upgrading their package, adding a decent gratuity. Once the legals and payments were finished, she gave them the keycard and sent them on their way. "Enjoy your stay at the Bittersweets," she said as she escorted them to the elevator. "You're in room 77 on our 7th heaven level. There is a resuscitation crew already waiting for you." "What floor would that be on?" John asked. He peered at the receptionist's name tag. "Azriel? Pretty name." Stella glared at him. The receptionist hoped they weren't planning on having children. "That would be the 7th floor," she answered, as she waved them to the elevator. "Have fun, lovebirds." The door slid closed and the receptionist's smile evaporated like rain in the desert. She allowed herself a satisfying eye roll before parking herself back behind her desk to wait for the next client. She hated love for love's sake. Above her, the couple was just exiting the elevator onto their floor. The carpet was a dizzying display of hearts in all shades of red and pink. The walls were painted to look like they were clouds and golden sun rays with cherubs frolicking in their downy depths. Above, the ceiling was all twilight sky, sunsets and galaxies blended into the wall patterns and set in countless silver stars above. The man counted at least 5 full moons from the elevators to the end of the hall. Inset lighting lined the hall's length, creating a luminous effect on the stellar panorama. He whistled. "This is worth every bit," he said. Stella agreed. She looked up at her future husband, overcome with passion. "I will die for you." He turned to her, his heart overflowing with gratitude that this angel had fallen for the likes of him. "And I will die for you, as many times as you need," he answered, and he kissed her deeply. "Our time has started," he said, voice husky with heat. "We need to get to our room." Together they stumbled down the hallway. He was following the numbered cards on the door while she allowed herself to be led, her gaze mesmerized by the painted spectacle over their heads. He located their door, slid the keycard, and led her through. The room didn't disappoint. It was as if they had stepped into a medieval chamber. The walls were painted to look like rough stone. The flooring was covered in a plush carpet with a realistic pattern that simulated slate pavers. Heavy pewter sconces hung from the walls, lit with holographic flames. In the middle of the room was a large round bed draped in sheer fabrics. The edge of the bed was lined with more holographic flames, giving the appearance that it was floating in a bed of fire. An altar festooned in fresh roses was to one side of the bed. On it was their Dom Perignon, in a pewter bucket of ice, 2 silver chalices, a silver dagger, and a small pewter plate that held 2 chocolates decorated with poinsettia flowers, pipped in frosting. Stella clasped her hands to her heart. "This is so beautiful," she said, her eyes welled with tears. She stepped away from John and let her coat and purse dramatically fall to the floor before running to the bed and collapsing upon it. She pulled her shirt open, exposing her delicate collarbones and white neck with one hand, while flinging the other across the bed. Her feet draped over the side, licked by artificial flames. "Kill me now," she said, and swooned. "I can't wait to die with you," said John. "But we didn't pay extra for the ambiance. We have this place for one amazing hour. Let's try out that bed for something besides death." Stella sat straight up and glared at him. "Not with the resuscitators watching," she said in a low voice. Her eyes scanned the room until they found a large mirror held in an ornate frame at the back of the room. "They are back there right now, talking about us. Can't you just be romantic for once?" John felt like all he did was be romantic with Stella, and it was always expensive. That would all change once they were married, he knew. He just had to keep up with her until then. "Sorry," he said. "It's just that you're so beautiful. You look just like Juliet from the old movies, and I am your Romeo." He picked up a plate with the chocolates and knelt before her on one knee. "Juliet, Juliet, let down your golden hair," he giggled. "Stop it. That's not even from the movie." He picked up one of the chocolates up from the plate and wondered how much it cost before he held it up to her lips. "Die for me, my sweet darling. Let this sweet death bring us closer together." His eyes fixed on hers as he touched the chocolate to her lips. Obediently, she bit into it. That's actually really good, she said around the bite. He popped the rest of the chocolate into her mouth, and she finished it. John, do you promise to marry me and always take care of me like your princess? He nodded. Then I eat this chocolate to prove my undying love to you by actually dying. Now me, he said. He held the chocolate up to his own lips, but she put her hand over it, preventing him from eating. First, tell me why you love me. Honey, we need to eat them at the same time, he said. Let me eat this and then I'll tell you. He tried to push her hand away, but instead she slapped the chocolate from his hand. It landed on the carpet. First, tell me why you love me. John looked for his candy, saw where it had rolled, and then looked back at Stella. He knew if he didn't cater to her demand, they were going no further with this. Stella, my beautiful girl, he said, looking intensely into her eyes. I love you because you are the prettiest woman I know. The most beautiful in the whole city, maybe even the world. Most likely the universe. Stella wrinkled her nose at him and giggled. He kissed her then and pressed her back onto the bed, feeling his passion rise. He could still taste the candy on her tongue. It made his lips feel numb. She responded with equal heat at first, but then pushed him back. I don't feel good, she said. Her flawless skin was beating with little pearls of sweat. She swallowed convulsively and her eyes teared up, her skin flushed. It's the poison starting to work, he said. When do you want me to stab you? She scooted to the edge of the bed and wrapped her arms around her middle. Don't talk to me right now. A loud belch rolled out of her, followed by a surprised whimper, and she clamped her hand over her mouth. Where's the bathroom? She asked from behind her palm. He sat up and started to slide his arms around her. Don't touch me! She slapped his hands away and fell to her knees at the side of the bed. Bathrobe! She belched involuntarily and started gagging. John sat back, insulted. You wanted this, he said. The bathroom's over here. He started helping her up, but she pulled away from him, curling at his feet. An animal cry came from her that choked out abruptly as she began heaving. He tried to push her away as she retched onto his feet, a bubbling noise his only warning. The sudden gush of wet heat soaking his shoes shocked him, and he kicked out instinctively. His foot caught her square in the face, knocking her back as she vomited chocolate and the remains of their romantic lunch a few hours ago. Strands of her hair were stuck against her damp skin, and a trail of blood began an exodus out of her left nostril. She sprawled on her back, arms and legs waving like an overturned roach, before she rolled back over and continued heaving. Hold my hair, she said between gags. Recalling, John sat back on the bed, overcome with disgust. Stella could be difficult and self-centered at the best of times, but her looks made up for her sour nature. His princess had transformed into a harpy, hunched over a pool of vomit and blood. John hoped cleanup was included in the price. I'm not feeling this anymore, he said. He kicked off his shoes and started peeling off his socks. You kicked me in the face. Her words were slurred, but she seemed to have expelled all the contents of her stomach for the moment. She knelt in the mess, muck-covered hands held out in front of her, the tears starting to leak from her eyes. It's not supposed to be like this. You ordered the wrong death. My clothes are ruined. She glared at him lopsidedly. Her dilated pupils were mismatched, giving her a cross-eyed appearance. And you kicked me. I'm sorry, Stella, darling. It was an accident. John didn't really want to hold and comfort the mess in front of him. but he held out his arms dutifully. John's father had warned him against Stella. He told John to avoid a high-maintenance woman unless he won the lottery. A woman you gotta work too hard for ain't worth it, his dad had said. John had to admit to himself Stella was definitely a lot of work.
You always have to be a jerk.
Stella was struggling to her feet.
I hate you. And maybe I won. I won. Marry you anymore.
This wasn't the first time Stella had threatened to break off the marriage, and usually it sent John into a panic. All she had to do was pout a little, and he was jelly in her hands. It was hard work, but he always seemed to be able to make things right with her. Her usually perfect makeup ran with the tears under her eyes, hair flat and dirty with tendrils stuck to her sweaty neck. Her nose still dribbled blood that smeared with the saliva across her cheek. He could smell the acidic odor of vomit on her from where he sat. His stomach turned and he dropped his arms, taking back his offer of embrace. She stumbled forward and stepped on something. Trying to turn her foot over to see, Stella wobbled and collapsed on the carpet, where she rolled about, trying to see what was on her foot. John's poinsettia cream was smashed between her toes.
Why haven't you eaten chocolate yet?
He had never noticed how her voice increased in pitch to a whine before it raked across his nerves like still wool on a sunburn. Stella, I'm not eating it now. It's stuck to your foot. I have to rinse my work shoes before they stink. He stood, avoiding eye contact. He remembered the resuscitation crew that was watching and wondered if they were having a laugh at him.
No, I ate the chocolate. You have to eat your chocolate.
Stella picked the candy off her toe and threw it at him. Her throw was weak and it fell at his feet. The poison was working through her system and she burped.
Eat your chocolate.
You had to have the expensive chocolate poison. And now look at my shoes. John held one shoe up at her, pinching the heel between his index and thumb to avoid the gore. You puked on me. This isn't romantic. You look terrible. I'm not doing this. John kicked the smashed chocolate back towards her. Yeah, you have both. He started to the bathroom.
No.
Stella scrambled crookedly to the small table and grabbed the silver dagger, knocking everything else down.
I'ma kill you.
She staggered towards John, who turned just in time to see her stumbling at him, wildly swinging the blade. He twisted to one side, and she missed sticking the dagger into his chest. Instead, it sliced through the soft part of his upper arm. He cried out and shoved her back. Stella's foot caught in the bed linens, and she fell.
You hit me.
Her eyes bulged at him, unfocused and angry. You tried to stab me, he said, backing up. She crawled towards him, tried to get up using the blade as a support. It twisted out of her weakened grip, cutting her palm. She collapsed and stared numbly at the blood on her hand, and then up at John. Her bloodshot eyes lit up with a toxic cocktail of adrenaline and malice. Ow! Her lips barely moved as she spoke, her low voice forcing its way past her clenched teeth.
We are supposed to die together.
She hoisted herself to her feet. To John, she looked like a witch from a nightmare. Blood, vomit, and blade approached him. He glanced behind him, looking for escape. He saw the mirror. Can I get some help? He said to the other room. This is going too far. There was no response from the mirror.
This was my dream. You ruined it.
She tripped over her own feet towards him and fell to the carpet again. Scared, John turned and ran to the bathroom. He slammed the door behind him and locked it. Help! he shouted. "I don't really want to die. Not like this." Stella had dragged herself to the bathroom door. He could hear her nails scrambling against the wood. She pressed her face against the crack in the bottom, hiccuping. John could smell her rancid breath wafting up.
"You and jerk,"
she said from the other side of the door. Quieter now, John bent closer to hear what she was saying.
"I am too good for you. Hate you. I slept with your friends."
Stella's breath wheezed from her in a hiss, and she was finally silent. John waited in the bathroom, surprised at his lack of surprise. He leaned his forehead against the door, expecting tears. Instead, a feeling of relief washed through him. After a full minute, he quietly unlocked the door and peeked out. She lay against the door jamb, still clutching the dagger, not breathing. Across the room, another door opened and 3 figures entered. "I am so sorry, man," said one. "That was intense. Do you want to be here when she wakes up?" John looked down at the spittle and blood-stained creature that lay stinking on the floor and saw her as herself for the first time. "No, I think I better be gone," he said. "So much for undying love." He retrieved one of his shoes from the bathroom floor.
"Don't blame you. You can get your injuries taken care of at the first aid in the lobby," said the resuscitator. "Clean your shoes there too."
The other 2 had laid Stella out and were preparing to revive her. John nodded. He knelt down next to his former fiancée, took her hand, and slipped the engagement ring off her finger and into his pocket. "I'll leave her cab fare at the front desk," he said. He picked up the Dom Perignon from where it lay half under the bed, glowing in the artificial flames, and left the room. He would need a drink after this, and he may as well start with the good stuff. He had paid for it. Downstairs, the receptionist waited at her desk. John suddenly noticed the cornflower blue of her eyes and how her long lashes began as black but faded to a honey blonde at the tips. Her hair was the same, dark roots that faded to soft gold. She helped him to first aid and even took his shoes to be cleaned while his arm was stitched up. She asked no questions when he left cab fare for his fiancée, but smiled comfortingly. "Did you enjoy the poinsettia creams?" she asked. John just shrugged. "I didn't get a chance to try them," he said. "There's always next time," she said. And then she batted her eyelashes at him like a damsel in distress from an old movie. John turned the ring in his pocket between his fingers and wondered if he was reading too much into that eye flutter. Whatever it may or may not have meant, the minute breeze her lashes created was enough to blow Stella from his mind. John felt better than he had in a long time. "Yeah," he said, hesitantly, and then he brightened. "Until next time." He handed her the bottle of champagne and pushed his way out of the door, leaving the bittersweets and old flames behind him. And that concludes our story for today. I hope you all enjoyed this reading of the Bram Stoker Award finalist book, Bittersweets, by Angela Yuriko Smith. I am Ryan Ozzie Smith, and it has been a pleasure to be your host tonight. If you would like to connect with me, join me on Twitch by searching Aussieman Plays, or click the link in the description.